This is Nick and Dylan's biomechanic video project. Today we're going to be looking at the biomechanics of a basketball free throw, going over the objectives and breaking down the skill into 4 phases.
Ever since 1894, free throws have been a crucial part of basketball. The free throw allows the player to take a shot without anybody defending him. Every successful free throw is worth 1 point. In the NBA, you are considered a good free throw shooter when you shoot 80% or higher from the line. Free throws are an important part of the game of basketball and make up on average 18 points per game, ranging anywhere from 15 to 21 based off of the NBA 2015-16 season. The free throw is also used as a way to slow the game down in later parts of the game. Teams will often foul the shooter in hopes that the shooter misses and they get possession to try to tie or win the game. The objective of a free throw is to shoot a basketball which is 9.5 inches in diameter into a hoop that is 10 feet off the ground and 18 inches in diameter. The shot is taken from 15 feet away. Some common errors of shooting a free throw. Lack of backspin forces the ball to bounce off the rim or backboard harder as backspin deadens the ball on impact. Poor alignment is another common error. You want to be in straight a line as possible to create less distance and better angles to the hoop. The ball being shot too hard is another common error. It gives a lesser arc on the ball and decreases your chance of the ball going into the hoop due to a smaller margin of error. Leaning at release will produce off-center force on the ball, therefore making the shot miss left, right, up, or down. Special considerations of a free throw. Arc of the shot. A higher arc of a free throw shot leads to increased chance of the ball going into the basket, as this allows more margin for error with the shot. An ideal shot reaches the height of the backboard. Another special consideration is backspin. Backspin deadens the ball when it bounces off the rim or the backboard, therefore stopping it from bouncing away, giving you an increased chance of the ball bouncing back into the hoop.
3.
Relaxed shooting motion is another special consideration. Too much tension in your shooting arm will interfere with your release as you want to be as smooth as possible to produce backspin and proper release on the ball. Being too tense will also decrease your range of motion with your shot, which will decrease your efficiency with your motion.
We're now going to break down the skill into 4 phases. The pre-throw routine or preparatory phase, the wind-up, or known as backswing, force production movement, and follow-through. Our first phase is the preparatory phase. In the preparatory phase, we have the preliminary movements. These movements vary from individuals taking the free throw and are generally used to help the shooter relax their muscles, reducing tension and tightness, and improve the shooter's concentration on the task at hand. Most players perform several dribbles with the shooting hand, allowing for the player to keep their wrist, hand, and fingers relaxed. Some players also utilize a technique called mental imagery. This is where the player imagines taking the shot before actually shooting. Although there isn't clear evidence on it boosting the results of completed free throws, it has shown to be a positive influence on the confidence of players, which could help in high-stress situations. To start the free throw, the player will generally move to the free throw line and place their right toe, if the right hand is dominant, on the line with their left foot beside the right or slightly behind to form a staggered stance. The slightly staggered stance is the most recommended stance for achieving proper balance. The stance should have the right toe, which would be the front toe, on the line, and the left toe, which would be the back toe, even with the arch of the right foot. It's important to note this stance because poor stance can result in a poor free throw. If stance is too staggered, the shooter might place too much weight on the front foot, resulting in poor weight transfer throughout the shot. An example of too staggered stance is where the back toe is level with the back half of the foot, or the back of the foot. Feet are generally placed shoulder width apart or slightly wider depending on player preference. Feet too close together may result in a balance problem because base of support is too narrow. If the foot placement is too wide apart, it will introduce a lateral component to the push of the feet on the floor. Players should have their body, toes, hips, and shoulders aligned directly with the basket. Players should then spread fingers directly behind the ball for the most control. Wrist should be an extension bent to the rear, and the ball resting on the finger pads. Here we see the player's body a little bit out of alignment with the hoop. This could have been prevented by him moving slightly to the left. The backswing for the shot consists of the movements that occur during the crouch and preparation for the shot. The ball is held stationary at waist level with the shooting hand behind the ball, with the other hand to the side to support the ball. The supporting hand should be placed on the side of the ball and slightly behind the center so the shooter is able to rotate the shooting shoulder forward to line up with the basket. The shoulder of the shooting arm is close to 0 degrees parallel to the body, with the upper arm held along the trunk. The knees are flexed close to 90 degrees and the trunk is flexed close to 50 degrees from the vertical. The trunk flexion is important as the movements from the flexion to extension provides a downward force placed on the knees, increasing the knee flexion, and has been shown to produce a more forceful knee extension. If the shooter doesn't produce a great enough trunk flexion, his shot will be unable to use the extra force created by the deep knee flexion to extension. The second part of the backswing is a ball raised up toward the shoulder level by using shoulder flexion and the trunk beginning to extend. The second part of the backswing is the ball being raised up towards shoulder level by use of shoulder flexion and the trunk beginning to extend. The initial shoulder flexion in the shot is to assist with the trunk extension and increase knee flexion. After the ball is being raised by shoulder flexion, we see the trunk extension causing the knees to increase their depths of flexion. Since the trunk carries 50% of the body weight, acceleration of the trunk upward produces significant forces downward, increasing knee flexion and ankle dorsiflexion, thus increasing our knee's ability to create more forceful extension. It's important to know that too much trunk flexion could result in the neck being hyperextended when going through the entire motion of the shot, resulting in the shooter being unable to focus on the target and extensive tension on the neck muscles, specifically the trapezius, thus impairing the smooth flexion of the motion of the shoulders during the shot. The force-producing movements are the movements that will result in an upward and forward force propelling the ball to the basket. It begins when the trunk reaches the vertical position and the ball is held just above shoulder level. During this phase, we see the knee and hip extending first. Soon after this is happening, the shoulder flexion begins until the upper arm becomes almost parallel to the floor, with the elbow flexion increasing to 130 degrees and the wrist positioned to hyperextension in order to increase the range of motion for upcoming flexion. The upper arm is raised vertically through shoulder flexion, and this motion produces much of the upward force for the elevation of the ball. The average range of shoulder flexion is 82 degrees for elite players. A common error in shooting is to perform the elbow extension and shoulder flexion at the same time. This means less contribution from the elbow extension in the shot, as its contribution is combined with the shoulder flexion instead of adding it to the velocity of the hand. Another error is excessive shoulder girdle elevation, in which the shoulders are brought up closer to the ears, causing tension on the trapezius and affecting the smoothness of shoulder flexion during the shot. Elbow is kept directly under the ball and tucked close to the torso, minimizing any lateral movement of the ball and making sure the ball is being pushed upward towards the basket. Wrist is held in hyperextension for most of the elbow extension. Wrist flexion produces the backspin on the ball as it moves up the fingers to the fingertips, touching the index last before release. Wrist range of motion should be around 54 degrees. The correct upper body movement sequence for a free throw should be trunk extension, shoulder flexion, elbow extension, and wrist flexion should be simultaneous. At the end, the ball is released, the trunk and legs are fully extended, and the shooting shoulder is at 140 to 180 degrees of flexion, nearing perpendicular to the seating. That is important because it allows greater transfer of vertical forces to ensure optimal vertical velocity. Elbow should be near full extension and wrist is in mid-flexion. Both should be at maximum angular velocity. Wrist flexion provides the assistance in determining factor for the velocity and angle projection of the ball. Most of the power should have been generated from the elbow extension and wrist flexion. Muscles in the arm should be relaxed, ensuring that the least amount of energy is required, resulting in a smooth shot with no excessive tension. Wrist, forearm, and upper arm and shooting side the body should end up in a straight line and perpendicular to the floor. The final phase of the shot is the follow-through, in which all the joints continue to move through to the end of their full range of motion following the release of the ball. In this skilled follow-through, the legs are fully extended and ankles are plantar flexed, toes pointing to the floor. The trunk is vertical and the shooting hip is lined up vertically with the knee and ankle, as well as joints with the shooting arm. The shooting shoulder is at least 140 to 150 degrees of shoulder flexion. The closer the upper arm is to the vertical, the better, because the greater vertical forces apply to the ball. The movement of joints to the end of their range of motion will ensure that joints do not stop moving prior to the release of the ball, which would decrease the release velocity of the ball. The trunk should be rotated away from the shooting hand to line up the shooting shoulder and arm directly with the hoop. This trunk rotation should occur during the release of the ball from the hand and is facilitated by dropping off the non-shooting hand from the ball. After the ball has left the hand, the elbows should reach full extension, the wrist should be fully flexed, the lower arm should be in pronation, and the fingers should not be pointed slightly to the outside, indicating that pronation had occurred during the shot. Elbow extension and wrist flexion are responsible for the application of the upward force and spin of the ball at release, which will help stabilize the fly of the ball on the way to the basket. Alright, thank you for watching our video. We hope you learned a little bit about the basketball objectives and why free throws are important, and something from the breakdown of the skill into the preparatory phase, backswing, force producing movements, and follow through. Thank you to Casey Hall, who was the shooter in our videos, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now.